It should be such an easy topic to approach. What's wrong with Alter Ego? What's wrong with the unique form Vegeta invented for the Granola arc? The answer's simple. Problems are shown with each of its actions. Vegeta unlocks the form and gets beat up. Vegeta fights Gas and gets beat up. Vegeta passes out right in front of Gas, and Vegeta gets one-shot by Frieza alongside Goku. Even if Alter Ego reflects Vegeta as a character or creates interesting parallels in the story, the problem with Alter Ego is that it can only lose. So why is that so hard to articulate? If you're wondering what I'm going on about, this is something I've taken issue with for like 3 years now, ever since it was unveiled. Instead of building on the forum or from any plot thread from the Granola arc, we ended up with a retread of the Superheroes movie. The story has been at a standstill ever since. Even though the problems are the same as 3 years ago, I have scrapped and rewritten this script at least 3 times. I made a freaking TTRPG instead of working on this script, for crying out loud. More on that another time. I don't know why, but no matter what approach I take to the topic, it just never feels right. My first attempt was to try and understand Toyotaro's intent with Alter Ego, his rationale to the design, and its role in the larger story. Digging deeper into the early sections of the arc, I thought I struck gold. Following this path shifted my attention away from the narrative perspective to a cultural one. I opened the Pandora's box of Toyotaro's writing thinking I had found the hope amongst the monotonous, deflating, depressing, infuriating evils, only to find disappointment at the bottom of the box. When both of those perspectives let me down, I was left with the obvious question of what should have been done instead, but that was less interesting than I wanted it to be. Things just never came together to make Alter Ego feel satisfying. Before I get too deep into that stuff, let's lay the groundwork on what Alter Ego is. Alter Ego is a transformation unique to Vegeta, derived from Beerus' teachings. It's framed as being the antithesis to Goku's Ultra Instinct. Whereas Goku will automatically dodge damage, and his movements will become more refined, Vegeta willingly takes the hit to make himself stronger, and allow himself ample time to plot out his next move. In theory, this is the perfect form for Vegeta. He's always been a more analytical fighter. The only character in Dragon Ball who might rival his cerebral fighting style is Piccolo. Back on Namek, Vegeta was always careful to measure up his opponents and plot things in his favor. Well, up until he underestimated Frieza. Or in the Buu arc, it was Vegeta who came up with the plan that felled the unstoppable Kid Buu. So whenever Vegeta shows his disdain for Ultra Instinct, it makes sense why. In the anime, he declares that he would forge his own path separate from the brainless Ultra Instinct, and Alter Ego is the perfect culmination of that. And that might be what made this script so tough to write. There shouldn't be a problem with Alter Ego. There is nothing more fitting for the prideful prince than something named for Ego. Something which affords Vegeta the time to freely do as he pleases. For a character who's always played second fiddle, he can always surpass his opponent with this form's limitless power. In theory anyways. For a form with divine, unbounded power, it has a lousy track record. But hey, maybe that's supposed to mirror Vegeta too. The first approach I took was trying to figure out what Toyotaro originally intended for Alter Ego, and how that went so far off the rails. This set me on a bizarre path, and you have no idea the lengths I went to trying to figure this out. I was doing Buddhist research and trying to connect it back to Journey to the West, because that's the original inspiration for Dragon Ball. Like, even if the connection was tenuous at best, and almost certainly a coincidence, it would have been an interesting thing to note. If this new form could have had these cool cultural references and tied back to the series' origin, it would have been a great thing just to talk about. But no! That already loose connection crumbled the harder I looked into it. Journey to the West is probably my favorite book too. To see a connection early on, only to get smacked in the face by the hard reality that there was nothing there, yeah, that sucked. With that angle a decided failure, I went back to try and find meaning in Alter Ego. The illusion of some coincidental connection to one of China's great novels convinced me there had to be something to this form. And there was! Sort of. There's some fun wordplay in the original Japanese for the name of Alter Ego that Toyotaro talks about in an interview. Basically, the word for instinct and ego are similar in kanji. Ultra Instinct is the body moving freely, and Alter Ego is moving the body freely. Honestly, I like that touch added to the form, even if it's something I couldn't pick up on just reading the series for myself. These two forms created an interesting dichotomy in how each form takes inspiration from their respective mentors. The early chapters of the Granola arc do a lot to show the emergence of Alter Ego and to create this dichotomy. It shows how both Beerus and Vegeta dislike the Angel's technique of Ultra Instinct, which helps tell us why Beerus would teach destruction to Vegeta. Beerus explains that destroyers don't rely on techniques that require you to keep a calm spirit in battle. Another reason this is a good fit for Vegeta. While Goku's struggling with keeping his emotions in check for Ultra Instinct, Vegeta bypasses that entire problem. There's also a contrast between Whis and Beerus' training styles that help exemplify the differences between angels and gods of destruction. Whis is a very hands-on teacher, while Beerus doesn't even acknowledge being a mentor. Vegeta is just stealing the technique. Something else that makes Beerus and his destruction a good fit for Vegeta, who's always refused any help in making himself stronger, Vegeta trains himself constantly, and before Whis, never had a mentor the way Goku has had so many. There are a lot of good setups in these early chapters about how different the two Saiyans are, and I admittedly forgot that until rereading the arc. It feels like Toyotaro forgot about them too by the end. I forgot that they had an actual training arc while Granola was wishing to be the strongest and trying to get information from the Heaters. I forgot that the action and fight scenes with Granola were honestly entertaining. If the arc ended with Vegeta and Granola's stalemate and Minato explaining how this was actually all a misunderstanding, I would have said this was a solid arc. I wouldn't go so far as to say the best, not even the best in Super, but if it ended right there, I would be praising it right now. It would have been a short arc that left open opportunities for the future, and gave Vegeta time to shine, but that's not the reality we live in. Unfortunately, the arc continued. That's the problem with approaching this topic. As soon as we get past the Granola fight, and Gas becomes the main villain, any potential for Ultra Ego is lost. If I want to discuss a cohesive narrative for Ultra Ego, I have to ignore everything with Gas and Bardock and Frieza at the end. Essentially, the second half of the arc would need to be shoved aside so I could say, yeah, Ultra Ego was so close to being great. Woo! There are no coherent themes that stretch across the whole arc. In just the first half, however, yeah, we can find a few. Beerus' lessons to Vegeta are on full display in his fight with Granola right before Ultra Ego emerges. Vegeta taunts Granola and weaponizes his tragic past against him. Vegeta goads him into making foolish errors despite the gap in their power. Looking at just Chapter 74, this was probably Vegeta's best showing, and he only hits Granola once in the entire fight, before transforming. He admits that Granola is stronger than him, with the important caveat that such rankings are not static. Vegeta controls a fight against a stronger opponent by using Beerus' lessons and his own experience. Vegeta demonstrates his growth from the barbaric conqueror of his introduction to the still proud warrior worthy of learning from the gods, and the chapter ends by rewarding him with a new transformation unique to him. This is a big reason I wasted so much time trying to make a Buddhist connection, because the main theme for the first half of the arc is to not be chained down by your past. When Beerus was teaching Vegeta destruction, he explained the secret to his unlimited power. Beerus is free from fate and consequences because he thinks of nothing but destruction. I thought this could be similar to escaping the cycle of samsara, and that becoming a god in the Dragon Ball world would be like awakening to being a Buddha and Journey to the West, which again is the original inspiration of Dragon Ball. I think that would have been a really cool connection and callback to the series' roots. But that entire train of thought got derailed as soon as we hit Gas. Honestly, it was a tenuous connection before Gas too. Specifically, the Bardock tangent would be what broke the potential connection and destroyed any themes to the arc. Beerus' teachings about not being controlled by your past gets overwritten by some Saiyan genetics predeterminism about what Saiyan pride is. I really don't want to talk about the Bardock part of the story, but Vegeta says he was reminded what Saiyan pride was from Kakarot's father. Like, Vegeta had his Saiyan pride on full display during his fight with Granola. Toyotaro really retconned something in the same arc so the grand lesson could come from Bardock. But all that isn't to say what the actual problem with Ultra Ego is. That's just how hard it's been to try and articulate it because I wanted to have something more. I wanted to understand the form, the intention. What makes it harder is that there is an intention. There is thought put into the creation of Ultra Ego. There are themes and even build up to it. In theory, this form had everything it needed to be great, like Super Saiyan or Ultra Instinct, but instead, we got a muddled mess that can't even win a fight. No matter how much effort went into its creation, the execution was a horrendously boring flop. How do you introduce a new form and not even have it win its first fight? There was a second bigger boss after Granola and a third in waiting. So why didn't Vegeta beat Granola? Narratively speaking, why didn't he win? The actual function of Alter Ego is to take a beating and gain power in proportion to the damage taken. It offers no protection. It doesn't convert damage into power. The user just gets hurt and gets stronger in turn. That's why every outing of the form ended with Vegeta more injured than we've ever seen him before. We have seen Vegeta literally die or job to Kid Buu, and somehow, when he's at the height of his power, when he unveils a brand new form, is when we see him at his worst. Alter Ego fails at everything it attempts to be, and I hate saying that. The form had so much potential. It captures Vegeta's edge and lust for combat. It perfectly displays how he's not a martial artist like the rest of the Z fighters, but a warrior through and through. Alter Ego lets Vegeta revel in bloodshed and brutal combat, but it always ends the same. What purpose is there to a form that hinges on absorbing pain if all that pain still ends with you in the ground? Believe it or not, I don't feel as intensely about Alter Ego as I did when it first unveiled. But even so, I don't want to see it return. Whatever the anime does in the future, I hope they ignore the manga. I would rather they continue Vegeta with Blue Evolution while Goku trains Ultra Instinct. At this point, it would be more interesting to see Vegeta claim Super Saiyan for himself, while Goku evolves to something else entirely. Alter Ego is a simple form to fix. Just give it a defense buff. Just have it win literally once. But even so, I'd rather they just ignore it. Instead of putting in the effort to fix a broken story of mashed together conflicting themes, I'd rather have something new and hopefully good without the need to fix it. Alter Ego debuted in the same arc as Black Frieza, and I went on about that form for 40 minutes when I could have gone for 4 hours. A form that shows up at the end of an arc for 5 whole pages is magnitudes more infuriating than the one featured in half the same arc. Every time I try to approach Alter Ego, I just feel deflated. Black Frieza, for as much as I hate it, made me feel something. A blue hot hatred, but something. Seriously, how does a new form get eclipsed by something with a 5-page appearance?